If you're thinking about taking a solo cruise, there are really only two types of people who do it. Now, that's not a blanket statement. Certainly, there are unique folks who fall somewhere in between. But by and large, people fall into these two categories. And which one you are completely changes how you should plan your trip. The first type books a solo cruise to escape. They want silence. They want a private balcony. They want room service and zero obligation to talk to anyone. And honestly, that's a completely valid vacation. The second type books a solo cruise to connect. They want communal dining tables, right? They want the group shore excursions and the solo traveler meetups, and to leave the ship with a WhatsApp group full of people they actually want to see again. Both are sailing alone, and neither is doing it wrong. But here's what's fascinating. The psychology behind why each type needs what they need is actually really interesting, and understanding it will help you figure out not just what kind of solo cruiser you are, but which cruise lines, which ships, and which experiences are going to give you the trip you actually came for. So in this video, I'm breaking down both types, the Solitude Seeker and the Social Explorer. I'll focus on what drives each of them and exactly how to cruise if you're one or the other. First things first, I am the solo cruiser Wade Heath, and if you feel like my reporting and perspective bring you any sort of value, I would encourage you to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a thing. And if you happen to be a solo traveler looking to cruise more often without having to pay that dreaded double occupancy rate, I get it. That's why I've put together my top 5 tips, exactly what I do prior to booking a solo cruise myself, so that either I am never paying a solo supplement or I'm just paying a greatly diminished one. If you'd like to learn more about it, there's a link for you in the description. We'll begin by focusing on the Solitude Seeker. This is where ocean is your sanctuary, where silence is a luxury, and yourself is finally enough. Imagine on day 2 of the crossing in your cruise, you've taken breakfast in your cabin, room service because the buffet at 8 a.m. just involves too many cheerful strangers, and you're now settled on your private balcony with coffee going cold, watching the horizon do exactly nothing. This is not loneliness. This, in fact, is precisely what you came for. Psychologists describe this disposition through the lens of what researchers call dispositional autonomy, a tendency to act from one's own internal values rather than external social pressure. Studies have found that this quality, more than introversion itself, predicts who genuinely seeks and enjoys solitude. The solitude seeker doesn't avoid people because they dislike them. They seek solitude because the absence of social performance is, for their nervous system, a form of restoration that nothing else replicates. That phrase, social obligation stress, is quite illuminating. It names the quiet, accumulated drain of having to calibrate yourself to another person's mood, to their pace, to their preferences, and even their silences. On a cruise with a partner or a group of friends, every decision is kind of a small negotiation when you think about it. Even enjoyable ones carry a low-level cognitive load. The solitude seeker has often spent years absorbing that load at work, at home, in the rhythms of ordinary life. The cruise is where they put it down. There's a philosophical tradition behind this too. Thoreau wrote a length about the importance of solitude for self-knowledge. Others believed periods of true aloneness were necessary for a person to transcend the expectations others place on them and discover who they actually are. The modern solitude seeker may not be thinking about either of them, but they are living something of the same conviction. That unmediated time with oneself is not about absence of life, but a deeper access to it. Research by psychologist Dr. Jenna Kirtley notes that solo travelers often find themselves more sensitive to their surroundings, more attuned to the light, the sounds, the texture of the port town's cobblestones when traveling without a companion, because they're not filtering experiences through anyone else's lens. Their inner stream of consciousness, uninterrupted, assembles experiences into something far richer. The observation is most pleasurable, as she writes, if you're the kind of person who enjoys being an observer. And for the highly sensitive person, a recognized psychological trait in which the nervous system processes sensory information more deeply, this is especially acute. HSPs are often overstimulated by large social gatherings and loud environments and the rapid-fire stimulus of a cruise ship's main decks. A well-chosen quiet corner of the ship, or a balcony above the wake, a spa appointment during the port days when everyone else has disembarked and, of course, prices are lower. These are not antisocial choices that they select. They are sophisticated acts of self-knowledge. If you're a solitude seeker, perhaps investing in a private balcony is the way to go. This isn't necessarily a luxury upgrade, it's more of a psychological necessity for somebody like you. A balcony becomes an outdoor living room, a thinking space really, a place to watch the ocean shift color at dusk without anyone asking what you're looking at. Also, in addition to that, for dining, you would master the off-peak hours is a solitude seeker. Avoiding the 6 to 7 p.m. dinner rush, breakfast in the cabin, a late lunch when the buffet empties, and a specialty dining restaurant where table for one is booked without any sort of awkwardness. These rhythms often turn meals into pleasure rather than performance. And on port days, maybe you are deciding to stay on the ship instead. When everyone else is ashore, the ship can kind of become like a private resort. The pool deck belongs to you. Paid activities sometimes run free on those days, and as I just mentioned, the spa treatments are definitely cheaper. If you do choose to head out on an excursion, I would say choose depth over breadth. Skip the 7 sites in 4 hours bus tour. Book instead a slow afternoon in one neighborhood, maybe a private food tour or a single museum. I think the solitude seeker wants sensory richness for a reason without that social obligation, and the itinerary can reflect that. And if you're searching for quiet on board, I would say get to know the ship's hidden hours, early mornings before 7 a.m. Even if you're not an early riser, this can really benefit you if you get to sleep early one night. Port days during the big evening shows, the forward observation deck, the library if your ship has one, the wellness deck, right? Often the serenity deck on places like Carnival. Every ship has quiet corners that most passengers never find. Go find your nook, go find your hideaway, and simply be. While I'm a firm believer every cruise line can potentially work for a solitude seeker, I would say that the luxury and premium lines like Silversea, Seabourn, Cunard, Viking naturally lean quieter, and they are far more refined than your mass market cruise ships, with fewer loud activations, more cozy lounges, and an onboard culture that doesn't expect participation. I would also say that Princess, Celebrity, even Holland America, to a certain degree, tend to be a much more quieter atmosphere. And no doubt the solo cabin revolution has also helped enormously. Norwegian Cruise Line pioneered dedicated studio cabins in 2010, clustered around a private studio lounge, a model that many cruise lines are either trying to replicate or they're trying to dip their toe into a little bit to see what sort of demand is there. For the solitude seeker, a well-designed solo cabin I don't think is necessarily just about the price. Avoiding that single supplement charge for occupying a double room alone is always nice, but I think it's more so about having a space that is architecturally very much yours, scaled to your needs with no visual reminder that it was designed for someone else. And one truth worth sitting with here is that the solitude seeker is not running away from life. They are in fact running toward a specific quality of being present. The ship is a container for that presence, and the ocean is its most reliable backdrop. And now we turn our attention to the social explorer. Every stranger is a potential story, and every communal table perhaps is a new beginning for them. They are at the first solo traveler mixer on embarkation day, glass of champagne in hand, learning the names of 3 people they'll spend the next week's shore excursion planning with on a WhatsApp group that already has a name. They're not avoiding solitude. They genuinely don't experience solitude the way the Solitude Seeker does. Time alone, for them, is what you do between people. The social explorer is often, but not exclusively, an extrovert in the clinical sense, someone whose psychological energy is replenished through social interaction rather than depleted by it. But the picture is more nuanced than that simple binary. Research by psychologist Beth Rabarsky clarifies that the introvert-extrovert distinction is really about how someone recharges their personal battery. And many solo cruisers who seek connection are what researchers call ambiverts, people who gain energy from social contacts but also need recovery time. They cruise solo not because they have no one to travel with, but because traveling solo paradoxically gives them more social freedom than traveling with a fixed companion would. This is the social explorer's great secret. Solo travel is not the obstacle to connection, it is the precondition for it. When you travel with a partner or a friend group, you have a built-in social world with you. You turn inward toward the group. The social explorer, however, unattached to any preformed unit, is available to the world in a way that paired travelers almost never are. Locals speak to them more easily. Fellow passengers approach them because there's no invisible fence of coupledom or clique to breach. The spontaneous invitation, the table shared with strangers that turns into a week-long friendship. These things, they happen to solo travelers with a frequency that surprises people who haven't tried it. Academic research on solo travel motivation confirms this clearly. Studies describe what researchers term the solo but not alone phenomenon, where social interaction with other travelers, locals, and crew becomes not just a byproduct of the trip, but a central motivation for it. For these travelers, the pleasure of new connection and specifically the low-stakes novelty of it, meeting people who don't know your history, your professional self, your family drama, is itself a form of self-exploration and renewal. The cruise ship is an almost ideal environment for this. The social explorer doesn't need to generate their social world from scratch each day the way a backpacker does. The ship provides a ready-made community with a shared itinerary, shared meals, shared spectacles, you name it. The communal dining table at a river cruise, the cocktail hour designed for solo travelers on Celebrity, the Korean barbecue communal tables at Virgin Voyages where the meal itself becomes the icebreaker. These aren't just amenities. They are social architecture, deliberately designed to make the kind of connection the social explorer craves both possible and quite comfortable. Something I think would benefit a social explorer type would definitely be building the community early, right? Prior to sailing, these are the types of folks that would no doubt benefit greatly by going to Facebook and searching for a cruise-specific Facebook page. Oftentimes, these are set up months in advance of passengers who are ready to rock out, have a great time on a particular cruise. You can join up and engage as much as you'd like with them. Maybe you join a cruise critic roll call for your sailing months before departure as well. The social explorer often arrives with 5 or 6 people that they already know because of this. The cruise begins before it begins, when you reach out in advance and you start the party on social media. And I know I mentioned it a second ago, but when it comes to dining, say yes to that communal table. The solo dining table on any cruise line is something that could benefit an explorer like this. A conversation over dinner really is the warmest start to a new friendship. Of course, when it comes to activities, choose those shared focus experiences like trivia nights, cocktail making classes, group fitness, cooking demonstrations, you name it. When there's a shared task, you don't need to generate social energy from thin air. The activity does the work. The friendship is really the byproduct of that. And when it comes to excursions, maybe book through the ship. Ship-sponsored excursions put you in a group of people you'll probably see again at dinner. A private tour might be a little cheaper, but it loses that social dividend for sure. The shared adventure of the zip line, the wine tasting, the ruins, they become a reference point for the rest of the week. And when it comes to the bar, I would say perch, but don't retreat. A bar stool can be the single most social seat on any ship. The social explorer probably knows that a drink at the martini bar, a seat at the casino, or a spot at the captain's cocktail party turns passengers into companions in the time that it takes to finish a glass. Some cruise lines that could be beneficial for the social explorer might just be Virgin Voyages with its adults-only atmosphere, bar crawls, PJ parties, Scarlet Night events. It's particularly designed for the socially inclined solo traveler. Norwegian Cruise Line Studio Lounge, exclusive to those solo cabin guests, creates a natural meeting point for solo travelers who want that company. And Royal Caribbean's vast onboard entertainment infrastructure, think about it, all their rock climbing walls and surfing pools and big production shows, they provide endless activity-based conversation starters. For those drawn to more refined connection, no doubt Cunard's daily coffee and cocktail meetups, their guest lectures and elegant gala evenings create a social world with depth and texture. And there's something psychologically valuable happening for the social explorer that goes beyond mere enjoyment. Researchers have found that solo travel, even for the most gregarious traveler, builds what they call self-efficacy. The accumulated evidence that you can navigate the world, you can solve problems, and connect with other humans entirely on your own terms. Each conversation started with a stranger, each excursion negotiated independently, each dinner table joined without hesitation is a small deposit in an internal account of confidence that doesn't disappear when the ship docks. In the end, the important thing to remember here is that the ocean belongs to both of them, and neither has it wrong. What the Solitude Seeker and the Social Explorer share is more interesting than what separates them. Both have made an active, empowered choice to travel on their own terms. Research consistently frames solo travel as an act of autonomy and true self-exploration, not as the absence of something better, but as an affirmative statement about one's own values and needs. Both types arrive at the gangway having already done something braver than most people around them. They booked a trip alone. Both will also find that the cruise ship, more than almost any other form of travel, accommodates them. The modern cruise ship is one of the rare environments that is simultaneously a world unto itself and endlessly customizable. The Solitude Seeker doesn't have to explain to herself when she skips the sail-away party, and the Social Explorer doesn't have to justify to himself when he books another evening at the communal table. The ship simply continues through calm water and rougher stretches, offering each of them exactly what they came out to sea to find. Are you a solitude seeker or a social explorer? Do you find yourself fitting into one of these two major categories when it comes to solo cruisers out there today? I'd be fascinated to hear exactly where you feel like you fit into this mold. As I researched and found more in terms of documentation supporting each of these categories, I thought, yeah, this is kind of exactly who I meet on board in the solo situation. Again, I'd be interested in hearing where you think you fit and how it is played into your overall solo cruise experience. And as mentioned earlier, if you're a solo traveler looking to cruise more often without having to pay that dreaded double occupancy rate, that's why I've put together my top 5 tips, exactly what I do to make sure I am never paying that dreaded double occupancy rate, that solo supplement anymore, or just paying a greatly diminished one. If you'd like to learn more about it, I've still got that link for you in the description. For the Solitude Seekers among us, I think you would find a great deal of comfort in the Emerald Princess. That's right, a ship that I did myself recently that I want to share with you here on the right. And for my social explorers, check out exactly what Virgin Voyages is like as a solo traveler there on the left. I am the solo cruiser Wade Heath, and I will see you next time.